Very cool. Fantastic, awesome. Well, it's my great pleasure to introduce Caroline Figueroa. I've known Caroline a long time, it feels like. Back when she was a postdoc at UC Berkeley, we did some work together along with a colleague of mine who's there, Adriana Aguilera. Dr. Figueroa is currently an assistant professor in digital mental health, is the title, at TU Delft. But she's on a Harkness fellow this year at Stanford as well as Hopelab. And she's doing a lot of work on responsible AI for young people, but really thinking about like the policy implications of it. And what I really love about her work is that she's engaging parties at multiple levels. So sure, you'll see this in her presentation, but she does a really great job of involving youth and young people and policymakers, and really just thinking about how we bring these different folks together to speak to this aspect of building AI in a more responsible way. So really happy to have her here. She'll be around for the next couple of days. So if you do want to meet with her individually, she has some openings and some flexibility. But yeah, just really excited for her to be here and really excited for her.
Thank you. Yeah, so much to you for the introduction. Thanks. Yeah, really excited to be here today. So is it, people can hear me online? It's fine. Yeah, so again, thanks so much for having me. I don't need to introduce myself anymore, which is great. So I wanted to start with asking you who uses generative AI like ChatGPT or Gemini to create something funny or something for entertainment. Do people use it in that way at all? No, no one? Just for work? Okay. So I have a 4-year-old son, and he has recently discovered that he can use AI to generate all sorts of things. So what he does is he goes into the inbuilt AI model on my phone, and then he asks it to create certain pictures for him. So he started with asking for a blue car because he loves cars. Blue is his favorite color. And of course, that was no problem at all. So it made this really nice, beautiful car. And then he got a little bit more creative, and he wanted a plane and a car combined. And of course, had to be blue. So then he asked for a blue plane car, which I think also looks pretty good. He got even more creative, and then he asked for a fish car. So I thought that also looked pretty good. I thought the AI model did a pretty good job making a toddler-tailored fish car. But at that point, my son was not satisfied because he thought this car didn't look real enough, and also it wasn't blue. So he went on and asked for a real blue fish car. So then it created this beautiful fish car driving down the road. So I actually just came here on a road trip from San Francisco. So it's kind of like what it looks like, although we didn't have this fish car. But at this point, he was even more empowered, and he asked for a fish car on the beach with hands and baguettes, please now. And that's where the model started to struggle a little bit, because it did create sort of a car on the beach, but it wasn't really with hands. It was kind of full baguettes, but you can see it looks a little bit messy. But he was satisfied, and he really enjoyed doing this. And why am I showing you this? I'm showing you this because I want to illustrate that, of course, we have a lot of benefits with generative AI tools that are entering all of our lives. And it's pretty amazing that a young kid can draw things completely without having his parents help him or other people help him. So there are a lot of benefits. But obviously, we see a lot of negatives as well. And especially a lot of people are worried about younger generations like teenagers. So we know that the use of generative AI chatbots is very high among teenagers. So according to latest surveys, this was actually a 2025 survey by Common Media, showed that 70% of teens had used AI chatbots. And also 1 in 3 use them for things like social interaction, including emotional support. And another thing that was quite striking was that they found that 30% of teenagers find these conversations to be as satisfying or even more satisfying than talking to real life friends. Okay, so quick pop quiz. How many teens use AI when they feel sad, anxious, or lonely? Who thinks it's A, 5%? One. Who thinks it's B, 12%? No one. Who thinks it's 20%? Okay, most people. So actually B, and I'm gonna give points to both B and C because there was a study earlier this year that showed that among young adults in the US, 12% used AI for emotional support, so when they're feeling sad, anxious, or lonely. But new reports are going to be coming out that are showing that this number has increased. So now about to 20%. So it was 12% and it seems to be increasing. And what you can see in this graph here on the left is that quite a large percentage uses generative AI at least once a month. And then also striking, if you look at what do they find this helpful or not, and that's the graph on the right, then you can see that most young people find it at least somewhat helpful or very helpful. And overall, it's 92% that says that generative AI chatbots are at least somewhat helpful or very helpful in helping them deal with emotional problems. And if you look at this on a bigger scale, so ChatGPT, which is one of the most widely used AI chatbots, has about, as of May 2026, has about 900 million users. So OpenAI had reports come out that said that less than 1% of these users show signs of mental health emergencies. And you can think, well, that's not a very high percentage, but then if you look at how many people that actually is, that's around 600,000 people every week that are discussing or showing signs of mental health emergencies while they're using AI tools. So that's very high on the global scale. And we know that, even though people think it's helpful, there's also many harms that are related to the use of AI for emotional purposes. This is not the entire list, but it includes things like emotional dependency on AI. AI tools are currently not the best at dealing with mental health crises like suicidal ideation or self-harm. And also they can engage in inappropriate conversations with giving harmful advice or sexual content for minors. And I'm guessing most of you have heard about the several lawsuits that were filed. This is one of the more famous ones where an AI chatbot firm was sued by the parents of a teenage boy who developed a romantic relationship with the chatbot character AI and died by suicide. And there were links between that AI use and the suicide. So AI companies are dealing with these lawsuits. So another pop quiz. Imagine a teen close to you using an AI chatbot for emotional support. So either maybe it's your own kid or maybe it's someone that you know. How comfortable do you feel if they were to be using this? So who would be not at all comfortable with that? Who would be uneasy? A couple of people who would say neutral. Okay, pretty okay. It's a couple people, and fully on board. Okay, so there's at least a little bit of uneasiness. I would love to hear from you later. I would love to hear your reason behind that later. So what I focus on in this, in my research and also in this fellowship that I'm currently doing at Stanford and Hopelab, is this question of how could we use generative AI in a responsible way to support rather than harm the mental health of young people. And in this time we have together, I would like to show you some perspectives on responsible AI, both coming from industry and policy, and also from the youth perspective. So I'm showing some of the research that's coming out of policy analysis and also multi-stakeholder workshops. And then I'm presenting some new research that we just finished doing interviews and focus groups in young people in the US and teenagers in the US to ask them how they use AI for social and emotional purposes, and also what they themselves see as the benefits and the risks. So I'm excited to be sharing those new results. So this is some of the content where we're going to look at responsible AI guidelines, new perspective, and priorities for policy. So what I did first is looking at what are major organizations putting forward when it comes to responsible AI guidelines, particularly for children and teenagers. So you can see these are some of the organizations that have been putting out guidelines around this topic. And then I looked at what do they have in common in their recommendations and where do they either disagree or might not mention certain aspects. And that's what you can see here. So currently there's 11 different frameworks and guidance documents that I looked at. And some of the high level takeaways that I want to give is that there are some things that all these frameworks really agree on, which are things like limiting emotionally responsive or addictive design, and also the need for more monitoring and oversight. And then there's some things that they don't all mention, and things like focusing on also positive AI features, or having adolescents be in the co-design phase, or banning AI companions. So should we be banning AI chatbots for young people under 18 is something that is still debated. And then another, so yeah, as I said, most frameworks, they do agree that we need more oversight, we need prevention of harm. But there's a lot of aspects that they don't agree on yet. And also a lot of these provide really high level ideas as opposed to concrete actions for industry and policy. So there's still gaps there. And also a lot of new ideas are emerging pretty much every week. So it's hard to keep track of everything. So what do young people themselves think about this? So as I said, we just finished a qualitative study with in total 48 young people, ages 14 to 22. And this is a collaboration between Hopelab, Stanford, and the Center for Digital Driving at Harvard. And this, what I'm going to show you, we're still working on the final results, but these are some of the preliminary findings that I really want to get out there. So again, just a quick quiz. Imagine there's a 15-year-old who uses ChatGPT every day after school to rehearse a difficult conversation with her friends. Do you think this is mostly a benefit or mostly a risk? So who thinks this would be mostly a benefit? Okay, 2 people, yeah. Who thinks it's mostly a risk? No one. And who thinks it's both? It depends. Okay, so we have a very diplomatic audience. So let's look at what young people themselves think about this. Oh, so one more. A different scenario, a 15-year-old who uses ChatGPT every night to talk through feeling overwhelmed and anxious at school. Mostly benefits. Okay. Two people, mostly risk. Okay, so a couple of people who think this is mostly risk, and then again, both, it depends. Okay, most people still think it depends. Okay, so let's look at the results from young people. So first of all, we asked them, how are you using AI? And to just give you some background information, these were young people that we screened based on whether they say that they use AI for social and emotional purposes, and also that they use AI at least once a month or more. And most of them used it a lot more than that. So when we're looking at use cases, we were broadly able to divide them into categories of cognitive, social, emotional, and health. So when you look at the cognitive use cases, a lot of this is around school and homework, but also quite a few of the older youth were using AI for helping them plan their career, or to write their CV, or to write letters for applying to colleges, and also as a tool to help them formulate their thoughts. There were a couple, interestingly, who mentioned using AI to actually learn how to code or even build a startup. So a couple of 17-year-olds who were able to build a startup with AI, so that was pretty interesting. And then when it comes to more of the social aspects, a lot of the social use is around getting advice to navigate relationships, like friendships or conflicts within friendship or family, breakups, but sometimes also using AI as a tool with friends. So asking AI a situation, to analyze a situation and then discuss that within a friend group, or using AI and then also going to humans afterwards. And when it comes to the emotional use, a lot was around advice in the moment. So I'm feeling anxious right now. What do I do? Even during a class, for example, seeking comfort, but also just having something to talk to. So venting. And there were also quite a few young people who use AI for advice about medical symptoms or for things like diet plans. And then we also focus on what the young people themselves perceive as the benefits and the risks of these kind of conversations, focusing mainly on social and emotional conversations. So when it comes to the benefits and the risks, when we look at the social first, the benefits that most people talked about were having a place to share things without either having the risk of other people sharing your secrets, but also not burdening other people. So not burdening other people with your problems. So sharing without social cost. A lot of youth also used it for helping with how do I go into this conversation, or tell me about this social interaction and what does it mean. And a lot of the young people talked about AI is not as biased as other people, and also helping them put things like feelings into words. And emotional aspects was similar. So having neutral advice that doesn't judge you, something that's always available, something that gives more helpful advice than humans, something that remembers me. So they perceived a lot of benefits. And I was gonna illustrate this with a couple of quotes from the young people. So first, as I said, a large topic was help with social interactions. And one young person mentioned, we were agreeing to disagree. ChatGPT made it so that we can move forward without having more conflict. If I didn't have ChatGPT, I would have had to have an adult get involved. And another young person that mentioned analyzing her friend's text messages into Snapchat AI. So I put it into Snapchat AI. Can you please summarize it and make it more understandable? It gave me a small little summary, and now I understand what she's feeling in this message. Or another young person talked about using AI to help with family relationships, dealing with some past issues with my mom. Sometimes I figure out what to say or how. Why does she feel this way? Why would I feel this way? What can I do to resolve our conflict? And it actually helped. And then when it comes to emotions, again, a lot of it is around in the moment help. So this young person who was struggling with school and told AI that she was really struggling. What do you think I should do? It walked me through and it said, okay, you need to breathe. You're not doing anything wrong. It walked me through the conversation with myself. It got me to admit that I was overwhelmed and I really packed a lot of stuff into my schedule. So she said that this really helped her. And then another young person who said, I used it to help me write stories about my trauma. It's been really powerful and healing. And again, a judgment-free space. This young person who said that she calls it talking to the void, because she closes the tab and the whole conversation is gone. Getting those things out in the world and knowing that it won't hurt anyone. She used AI without logging in, so she felt like if she closed it, then no one would, it wouldn't have any consequences. Or another young person who said, AI will not use my information or my business against me, so I feel completely comfortable telling it literally anything. And then accessibility. One young person who mentioned being neurodivergent and said, if I could talk to a mental health professional or receive help from a therapist, I would. But I come from a culture and my parents, and there's a stigma of seeking mental health help. So there was both this stigma and also this idea of, because I'm neurodivergent, other people don't always understand me, but AI understands me. Or sometimes young people don't have adults or other people to talk to. So this other young person who said, I don't have many adult figures to look up to or to ask advice from. I would have gone to my mom if I talked to her. I try not to have such an emotional connection with AI, but sometimes I genuinely need to ask about some stuff. So for a lot of them, it's a new place to, for comfort and advice. But young people also perceive a lot of risk. So I will say in general, they are, most of the young people that we talk to are very aware that this use doesn't come without risks. So things that were often mentioned are AI, if you have AI, it could isolate you from humans. There's sensitive data, what happens to the data? They call it confirmation bias, so AI sycophancy, that it also always tends to agree with you. So a lot of young people noticed that and didn't think and thought that was harmful. And then coming through both social and emotional is this fear that kept coming back of AI dependency. So I'm becoming dependent on AI for my social interactions, for my emotional interactions. And this also was a big theme in the cognitive use, actually. And other risks for emotional, again, over agreements. A lot of young people had heard about suicide on the news, AI related to suicide, and also sometimes advice that is not tailored to a situation or that could be harmful. So I'll give you, again, a couple of examples of this. So the emotional dependency part, one young person said, I don't want to get emotionally attached. If the server shut down, I'm just out of luck and I need that not to be on my plate. Or another person who said, I think it would probably be better if I didn't use AI, because then I might be more comfortable with speaking up about my feelings instead of being able to hide behind a robot and talk to it. Or social dependency. I'm needing a robot to talk to figure out what I'm trying to say. But that's what this world came to, I guess. And another person, as an introvert, it's very easy to fall down the rabbit hole of, I have my friend on my phone, so there's no need to go out and foster those connections with other people. And then what I also wanted to stress is that even though a lot of young people are using AI in a way that seems like maybe what we would call friendship or companionship, they're very aware that AI is not real. And that it's not the replacement for social interactions. And a lot of them are also aware of the incentives, such as the business models, like this young person who said, it just hit me for the first time that you're designed to keep me on the side to make you money. So there is quite, I feel like sometimes they know more than adults know about AI. So to summarize, key insights from young people. So what we know, not only from this research, but also from surveys and other research that's being done, is that AI is really shaping how many young people connect, how they learn, how they find social and emotional support. And that comes with many perceived benefits, but also many risks that are observed. And I showed you the risks that young people perceive themselves, and if we would add what we know from the literature, that list is going to be even longer. And young people seem to put a high trust in AI advice. sometimes more than human advice, but at the same time, they are also critical and understand that AI is not a real person. Okay, so for the final part, I wanted to walk you through some of the industry and policy priorities that we could take away from this, and also from some of the stakeholder workshops that I co-organized. So one of them was at Stanford, where we had people from industry, people from academia, people from youth organizations and civil society coming together to discuss priorities for responsible AI for youth mental health. I did the same workshop at the Canadian Kids Help Phone in Toronto, and we also did a similar workshop with the WHO. Stephen came to 2 of those 3, so he might know what I'm going to talk to you about. But I wanted to just highlight a couple of things that are coming out both in the opinions of young people and in the multi-stakeholder workshop. So one of them is around what we have termed pro-social AI. So how can we design AI to more actively support empowerment of young people, given that they do see so many benefits? Is there a way that we can amplify the benefits and minimize the risks? So this is around empowerment and autonomy, but also privacy of sensitive information that young people are sharing, AI literacy. Can we make AI literacy a central component of education, not only around AI for homework and schoolwork, but also how do you deal with using AI for social and emotional purposes? What is safe and what is not safe? Those are definitions that we currently don't even agree on yet. And then how can we use AI to get to better social relationships instead of eroding human contact, which is a big fear of many teens. Then the second is really thinking about how can we better involve young people themselves into AI development, AI governance. For me, talking with young people about this subject really opened my eyes to all of the different ways that they're using it, all of the knowledge that they have, and again, some of the use cases that I would have never thought about as an adult researcher. So they can help us identify those use cases and also those challenges that are not always obvious. And then another priority is we lack a consensus on outcome measures. So as I said, we receive a lot of benefits. How do we define helpful versus harmful engagement, both on the short term and on the long term? What do we define as long-term outcomes? In some of the workshops, young people mentioned we shouldn't only be looking at mental health. We should also be looking at measures like loneliness. What is it doing to relationships? And also, can we test some of the effects of AI policy and design features on youth well-being? Another topic that came up is focusing on the measuring the positive outcomes as well. So understandably, a lot of the debate is around minimizing severe risks, including suicide. But are there any evaluations that are also looking at the positive side? So how do we measure what is actually helping people? So these are actually some quotes from the industry developers. Another thing that was mentioned was this concept of benchmark slop. So we have a lot of benchmarking tools that different organizations are developing that are continuously coming out, but how do we actually know which ones are trustworthy and which ones are evidence-based and which ones are not as grounded in research? So defining that benchmark slop. And then, of course, we need to also acknowledge that there are many structural forces that are making this work very difficult. These are some of the quotes, again, of people who are either in industry or have been in big tech, who mentioned, for example, no matter how big you are, you have to compete to get bigger, and no matter how fast you're growing, you have to grow faster. or until it becomes a strategic business decision, companies are not going to put in the time and effort and technical capability that it takes to make AI safer for youth mental health. So that's also where the oversight becomes very important. Okay, so to check again if any of this has changed your opinion or not, imagine a team close to you using an AI chatbot for emotional support. What do you think now? Would you be not at all comfortable? Would you be uneasy? Couple uneasy, neutral, and pretty okay, fully on board. Okay, I think still people are in the uneasy neutral category. What I wanted to end with is some recommendations that young people are giving for policy. So a lot of young people mentioned that they feel ambivalent about things like bans. So for example, they mentioned it's about finding the balance. If you ban it, that gets rid of the positives, or every kid is different. Not everyone is dependent on it. Sometimes there are people who actually need it, really just need a friend. And another thing that a lot of young people mentioned was having those safeguards in place to really coach people through difficult situations. So obviously saying go call 988 is not enough, which is also what many of the experts agree with. So to end with some takeaways, what I wanted to show you is that when it comes to using AI for social and emotional purposes, there are a lot of both benefits and risks that young people perceive themselves. They have a critical attitude about AI, but also a fear of becoming dependent that kept coming throughout the conversations. Some of the priority areas are involving young people in AI governance, having these consensus on outcomes and measurements, and also having oversight and legislation. And as I've been talking and thinking about AI dependency, I also feel like we need a better definition of that, and also some consensus on what we think AI should actually be helping with when it comes to social and emotional support, and what it should not be doing. So this is not only important for teenagers right now, but also for the generations growing up today. I started with my 4-year-old. Obviously, I worry about what is the future going to look like for him. Will he have all of these new amazing capabilities with AI, or will he be at risk of having his health and mental health harmed by all of these new technologies that we're developing today? So this is important both now and both for generations to come. And yeah, let me know if you're interested in collaborating. I'd love to further discuss these topics. And thank you for listening.
We also have mic if someone wants to ask a question.
Definitely have some questions. Very lovely presentation. I'm curious. So you mentioned like ethical dilemmas that young people raise, and I'd be curious, what were some of the ethical dilemmas that maybe like most surprised you or were unexpected that you heard from the young people in the work that you did?
Yeah, I think what I noticed was that a lot of young people had there seemed to be a consensus of AI is not a therapist, so it shouldn't be used as therapy. But then on the other hand, there might be young people who really need it and have a lot of benefits. So for some young people, it might be okay, but not for all of them. So I think it's not that black and white. So really thinking about in what situations is it okay to have an AI be sort of a mental health support.
Yeah, although what's kind of interesting, I think, in the dichotomy you raise, that that seems to be focused on. By saying what's kind of interesting to me in that dichotomy you raise is it's kind of focused on access.
Yeah.
Which is maybe not the best way to kind of think about like who needs it and who doesn't. And I mean, it's really challenging. And like, I'll say like, I have a very unique situation. I have triplets, and so I have to make decisions around multiple things at one time. But we're getting at the age where we're thinking about like, potential smartphones and when should they get them. And what's been really challenging for me is that I see very, closely that like one of them's probably would be fine with it, one of them would be a disaster, and one's kind of in between.
Yeah.
And I think lots of parents could make that decision where they could make that one off, but I have to make it 3 at a time. But I think it really has just shown me some of the real challenges in thinking about these like one size fits all solutions when it's, there's so much to think about the context, but also the individual kid. So, I mean, I think we're often forced, or not forced, but we often fall into making these choices based on questions like access when there's just so much more complexity, I think, that goes into it. So it's interesting.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's also some of the things, or one of the things that young people were saying as well, is that they think that for some kids who have a very good supportive network, it's probably fine. But for kids who are more lonely and could really become too attached on AI, that's a different story. So yeah, these dilemmas are things that they also recognize. Yeah.
Can I add to that about the complexity of it is because 14 to 22 is a pretty big age bucket. And I'm wondering if you saw differences in sort of benefits and costs that were really age specific. And then also how AI is such a big bucket. And does it matter if you actively go to chat, if you just actually ask questions into the AI generation within Google, if you're using an AI bot on social media, like your Snap AI? Did you see different? Because like proactively looking for it versus happenstance engaging with it is a different process.
Yeah. So I think for the different ages, and this is qualitative research, obviously, but I think what I noticed was that the older teens seem to be more critical about AI and also more worried about the younger teens. So where they also said, well, for me, it's okay. I can understand, the risks, but I worry about my younger sister, for example, who might not understand everything, or kids who are, as I said, kids who are lonely. I worry about them. And we do. I think the emotional use was a little bit more pronounced in the older teens, and that's also what we see in survey research, that the older teens are using AI more currently for emotional purposes. So that could be another difference. And then your second question. Can you remind me your second question?
About the type of AI they use, and if they're going specifically to AI spots, or they're just happenstance using it in the ways that exists in their ecology.
Yeah, that's very that varied a lot. A lot of teams were using ChatGPT because they felt that ChatGPT was more friendly and comforting. But there were also a couple who used Snapchat AI specifically for friendship, because that's already within a social setting, and you can chat with your friends and you can chat with AI. So they found that more natural. And then a couple who did use AI generated summaries on Google, or had specific preferences for a particular AI because of things they heard in the news. So it does differ quite a bit, but I would say, I think ChatGPT is one of the main ones still, right now.
Also, someone online, a doctor found.
There's a question in the chat.
Go ahead.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I'm really intrigued by this fear of dependence that the teams described, and I was curious if they had defined what they meant by becoming dependent on AI.
Yeah. What they mainly talked about was both there were a couple of aspects to it, I would say. So one of them is not needing humans anymore, because AI will give you better advice and it's always available. So that replacing relationships. And then the second one was really around feeling like you need AI to help you with important decisions, whether that's about relationships or about your emotions. And that's sort of this feeling of, I feel like I really need AI for those decisions right now, but what if at some point what would happen if I lose access? Then there would be a problem. So I think it's mainly those two aspects that I heard them talking about. Thanks for your question.
Great talk, super interesting. I'm curious if you were able to distinguish at all between when they were talking about risks, if you were able to distinguish at all between what they kind of organically identified as risks through their use versus what they've been told through, media or by their parents or whatever. Like, if you have any sense of a distinction there between their understanding of the risks.
Yeah, I would say that they're definitely the risks that they themselves identified were things like the sycophancy, so feeling like AI is too agreeable, and acknowledging that can be harmful and also not always give the best advice. And then sometimes they did find advice to not be very specific to their context, potentially harmful. A couple of times medical advice that they mentioned. And then also around how their friends were using it. So for example, some of them talked about AI because it's always so agreeable and it sides with you. It gives you advice that for example you should not talk to your friend anymore. You should leave the relationships, even though it's not such an escalated situation. So that was a risk that they saw as well, harming relationships with other people through their own use. And then another way that they found out about risks was social media. So other people putting their interactions on social media or the news. So the suicide risk was something that they saw on the news, not something that they shared with me that they experienced.
Right.
But more of those, severe risks are things that they hear in the media. Yeah. And they didn't really talk to their parents or teachers.
No, okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
So there are two questions online, but anyone who can go rotate between in-person questions and online. Anyone else from in the room?
Maybe I can ask one. Hi, my name is Nitish. I'm a PhD student with Dr. University. Thank you so much, Dr. Figueroa, for the talk and the great work that you're doing. So I'm curious about what you're excited for in the next steps and how are you planning to integrate all of this in your future work?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So what I would love to do what I'm hoping to do as a next step is combine this qualitative research also with real world uses data. So having download the ChatGPT or other AI tools outputs to see how those conversations are actually evolving, and combining that with then asking young people not only how they felt about the conversations, but also what did they actually do. So for example, if AI gives you certain advice, do you actually do it, or do you first ask a human, or do you do something else and then you might decide to do it or not? So I think there's a lot that we don't really know about how people use AI in their daily lives. So I'm hoping to combine those youth qualitative insights with their actual use, and also having young people help us define what do you think a perfect conversation looks like, or how should this conversation have evolved, and what are those use cases that are okay and what's not okay. And then combining that also with, you know, what do psychologists think and developmental experts. And translating that into hopefully recommendations that industry can use and hopefully will use.
Thank you so much.
Okay, there's one question online on the topic of AI being a broad category. Have you seen any of preferences and or concerns for using an AI that's developed specifically for mental health support? For example, not a general purpose one like ChatGPT or Snapchat. If not, what do you think you would think about? Think based on your interactions with.
Yeah, that's a good question. And in this research, I really focused on general purpose AI tools. Young people didn't mention using any mental health specific tools. So I am not sure what their opinion would be. I can say from other research that I've done on mental health apps, I've gotten very non-enthusiastic reactions from teenagers about the use of mental health apps. But if it's a specific AI chatbot, maybe that would be more interesting. It's a great question. Definitely be follow-up research.
Thank you.
Yeah, good. Thanks for the talk. Site. I'm also a PhD student, Dr. Ramani. So my question is, you mentioned that the industry moves very fast. They go big. So in such situation, what do you think, or what do you think which action should be taken by the industry or those kind of organization to prevent those AI tools from being secure to being unsecure? So there's like maybe a transition between the development.
Yeah, so your question is around security of AI tools?
Yes.
Yeah. I think a lot of it does, as you said, industry is moving so fast. So I think a lot of this shouldn't be left up to industry alone. There's consensus about if you just let industry regulate itself, then you're not going to have the best regulations in place. So one bigger solution would be to have independent auditing system, and ideally that would be one auditing system that be global. Ideally that holds the companies accountable in doing independent testing when it comes to things like privacy and safety and mental health. So I think that's one of the things that we're really missing right now is that accountability.
That's good. And also one more follow-up with this is because those kind of a general purpose model, they're, for example, ChatGPT, cloud, and other ones, they're not open source. So it's very hard for researchers to dig deeper into the layer of the model itself. So what do you think in such situation, how would independent organization audit those models?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure what kind of access they could have. Does anyone else have any ideas?
I think you need regulation, right? Because I think it has to be more like the banking system, right? Where you have a regulator with access. Banks don't claim intellectual property rights like tech companies do in the same way. Like I think you do have to have an external that makes it accessible but keeps intellectual privacy or IP for companies.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think or a model like the FDA has with, you know, drugs where we have post-marketing surveillance and like the Sentinel system that like, you know, has certain risks that it's trying to watch, and that there'd be some way in which, you know, certain types of things that show up in these models would have to be turned over to like a central like repository to model that. Thought a little bit about, but it's like who would have the regulatory authority to do that, I think is a big question.
I had one question specifically about like the workshops that you held and trying to reach a consensus specifically around what AI literacy looks like in schools, and kind of said like, we know that it's a priority, but there's not a whole lot of maybe agreement on exactly what that looks like. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about kind of the discourse or like disagreements that may come up around shifting like focus for what that looks like.
Yeah, so what people talked about and what's important for AI literacy. Yeah, I think the emphasis there was on well, that AI literacy should be, you know, mandated within schools, and that it is not only around the more of the how do you, what are the policies for using AI for homework, but also making young people aware, and even teachers, because a lot of teachers also don't know what are the limitations of AI, what are the risks, hallucinations, but also the frequency, the harmful advice, having education around all of those aspects, and also having that in the emotional and social domains, and having something that is uniform across schools, because right now a lot of schools have very different policies, and that's also one of the things that I heard from young people, that it's very hard for them to know what to do with AI at school, because even among teachers they have different policies, or the policies will change, and the current systems that are in place are not always very helpful. So having that uniform system around cognitive, social, and emotional literacy.
So there's one question online. Jamie asked, I noticed that some teens were saying that they don't want to get emotionally attached. Does that mean that they were recognizing their own attachment to AI or recognizing their dependency? And is there a distinction between emotionally attached and dependent?
Yeah. So yeah, in the quotes that I showed from teenagers, those were really around them recognizing that as a risk for themselves or for others. So the fear that they will become too dependent, or other people will become too dependent. And whether, I think it's a really interesting question around attachment versus dependency. I think there are various opinions about that, because there are also some teens who said, I'm using AI as a friend, but I'm okay with it because I don't think it's harming me. Whereas others said, I'm using it that way and I feel like it's harmful because I'm not talking to other people, or because I can't do without the advice anymore. So I do think there's a distinction. I don't think we have a very good definition, or I'm not aware of a very good definition of that yet. But I do think there's that distinction, yeah.
I have a follow-up question on that, because I think if there are clear definitions or around, or if the community can come up with some definitions, I think then it would be interesting to see if we can quantitatively also measure those as some sort of metric.
Yeah.
That whether the user is developing dependency or something like that, because at the end of the day, we have metrics, or we try to have metrics for different aspects of safety, bias.
Yeah.
But I haven't seen. I'm not very up to date in the literature, but I haven't seen something like that can quantitatively measure dependency. I mean, of course, it's a trajectory thing, right? It's not like a single turn over time.
Yeah.
It looks interesting to me.
Yeah, I think that would be really interesting. I think the companies might have something like that for themselves internally. And there may be some benchmarking systems that have been working on it, but I think having a more uniform definition is probably very interesting. So
Yeah, I'm afraid the companies may use that as a reward system for them, because the more dependent for them is like you. But from a human perspective, that the definition might be a little bit different, because that might be something that you want to maybe you don't want to minimize, maybe on a balance, I don't know, but definitely don't want to maximize. That's something. But I think these are what I struggle with is because we're trying to also quantitatively assess many of these things. There's a lot of still ambiguity around defining several of these things so that we can measure.
Yeah.
At the end of the day.
Yeah, I agree, because you could have a conversation where an AI would nudge a user to or say you should really go talk to a therapist, and then that user might say, I don't want to talk to a therapist, I just want to talk to you. Then what is the correct response after that? And when is that already emotional dependence or so yeah. I agree. Yeah.
Please.
I'm wondering about, so we got to hear from you about what you learned from the teams. We got to hear from you about what you learned from the policymakers and the developers. I'm curious from where you're standing right now, knowing so much more than all of us do. What do you see as? I feel like if you ask me what are the risks of some behavior of mine, I'm like, oh, I have some guesses, but I might just be riffing. I might just be saying what someone else has said to me, or it tried to make me end my friendship with my best friend, so that's the biggest risk, or whatever. I'm curious, from your point of view as the scientist who knows all the things that you've heard from these people, what do you think are the really robust, or I don't want to say robust because we don't have enough evidence yet, but what are the most promising leads in terms of really understanding the serious risks that may be present with kind of the proliferation of AI use?
Yeah, when you say most prominent leads, do you mean what types of research or what?
Yeah, I just mean if you were going to run a study trying to get at not just risks people think. I don't know. I spent a lot of time on the problematic social media use space.
Okay. Yeah.
And there's a lot of things that people think social media is doing that's harming teenagers. And the evidence is very weak or non-existent that those things are actually happening. And so I'm curious about, kids may think their AI use is causing certain problems, but they might be wrong. Yeah. And there might be some, morsels of evidence that suggest, well, actually, those things are all not super concerning, but actually this one maybe is we should be looking here a little bit more. I'm curious kind of where you think things are pointing.
Yeah, I think from this research, I mean, there's obvious risks that are very harmful around suicide, self-harm, eating disorders is another one. And I think I do feel like the dependency one is something that I think we should be studying more, because it's one that teens themselves find important, and it can lead to other types of mental health problems. So becoming very emotionally dependent on AI, it could either lead to not talking to humans anymore, feeling like you're not autonomous, but also potentially lead to more severe mental health problems if users are so stuck with get even more stuck on their phone or their computer. And because we know that AI can be so agreeable, that could lead to harmful cognitive distortion. So I think there's many ways in which that aspect could lead to more severe issues. And then I also think when it comes to mental health, there's a danger in the more subtle conversations. So detecting if someone says, I want to kill myself, that might be, and that's pretty easy to detect. But if it's over a very long conversation where a user might say, I don't, what's the point in everything, or I don't know if I even want to go to school, that's more difficult to detect that there's actually an emerging problem happening.
Mhm.
So I think it's more of the subtle aspects that are worrying.
Thank you.
There's one more online.
Okay.
So the question, I was wondering if the youth mentioned oversight or monitoring at all, and what their feelings were about it.
Yeah, so I asked them about what are their policy recommendations, and also do they feel like we should be banning AI chatbots for kids under 18. And most of them did feel like there's some sort of policy needed, and mainly around making sure that kids with different ages have different experiences. So maybe not necessarily banning everything, but ensuring that some conversations are not possible for kids under 18, or that there was a more of a consensus of not using AI under 13. So there seemed to be this importance of the different age policies around different ages. And a lot of, some of them who did, it kind of differed based on their experience with AI, but there were a couple who really didn't trust AI companies, and others who had less of a strong opinion about this topic.
Thank you. Please.
I had one follow-up question around the dependency conversation. So it seems like a lot of that is focused around like emotional dependency and like social advice, but I was curious if the schoolwork part came up at all with that dependency, and like how that kind of played into like the perspective on like education or anything like that, like if that came up at all.
Yeah, that came up quite a lot as well. So it wasn't the focus of the research, but you can't really talk about AI without talking about school, or at least that just comes up. So again, here both benefits in terms of I'm able to understand information much more quickly. I'm able to do my homework more quickly, so I have more time to do other things. But then also that idea of I'm afraid I'm not really using my writing skills or my creative skills, and becoming dependent on those kind of questions for using AI, and also about sometimes about the future, like what are jobs going to look like for me. So that was definitely also a worry there. Yeah. Thank you.
I don't know. Questions online? Any other questions?
So I was thinking, like in this the case of AI in mental health. So there may be two different aspects. Like one of them would be like in terms of the regulation, like just avoiding any kind of responsibility, I would say. And the other side, that's how I think about it. And the other side would be like only making the mental, like inherently and like naturally improving and working on the AI for mental health to better manage the risks and stuff. For instance, to clarify what I'm saying is like, let's say the AI has no choice to call anyone or like do any specific task. It's you and the person that is talking to you. Now, what you would do to make it more safer. So regulation put aside. Do you believe we could move towards to handling this AI safety and stuff, just working on the AI itself without consuming any regulation are meant to be added or something?
So leaving it up to the companies, you mean, or you mean leaving it up to the industry itself, or?
Like I would say it's what I believe with the current flow that is like the AI, the open source AI is always a few steps behind the original ones, but it eventually catches up with some delay. So I believe in, like, let's say this is a problem at a year, 2 years, or 3 years, maybe. I think less than that. So the open source AIs are gonna be like strong enough, and people, I that's my personal opinion. People will more prefer more to talk to something that is open source. They're sure the data is not being stored or sent anywhere or stuff. And there you don't have any, like, you don't have much control over the open source AI. If that makes sense. So it's not. I think people are going to use more of those open source ones.
Okay.
And if we just think of the mechanism of controlling people and like policing, that's gonna push people away from the ones that, like, the mental health professionals, for instance, vouched for and like worked on. People are not gonna use that, maybe. But what are you gonna do if not? If that makes sense.
Yeah, maybe we talk about this later. But I think people will, thinking about people's behavior, my guess is they're going to use whatever is easiest, whatever is free, whatever feels most friendly.
What I'm trying to say is, I feel like people are not maybe not very much like the policies and everything. They would be afraid. Oh, what if I say something like that and then it calls the police for me, or something like that.
Yeah.
I believe the experts into psychology, like mental health, maybe it would be great to also put not all of it, but a good portion of their effort, rather than on, like, I would call maybe unfairly, just try to not be responsible, like avoid lawsuits for the company or something. Actually trying to try to improve the ability of the AI to handle the situations.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, that would be fantastic if we have mental health experts, more mental health experts actually working on how to make those models safe for mental health purposes.
All right. Thank you so much. I think we already had a very great discussion. Thank you for being mindful of time, because that gave us a lot of time for have a lot of interesting questions, and I'm quite sure many of these are open questions and food for thought for all of us. But we still have a few more minutes offline to chat if anyone wants to stay. But I think with that, we'd like to maybe conclude the session. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You should do more motivational interviewing on this platform. So I've seen that, like, the direction a lot of the companies come. It's like, is that what we